Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namassami. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be back in Malaysia. It was 4.5 years ago. Time flies. It's nice to see people coming back in person to listen to Dhamma. We've all been staring at screens. It's good to come together and express our faith and share our faith and see living examples. Monks and nuns who are practicing, and for some people, I think having more time at home and having access to teachings, a good number of people probably found that their own practice deepened during the what you had here called the MCO, the having access to teachings, having more spare time, having more sense restraint. I observed that the people who had a strong practice, it seemed that their practice deepened. And it's very interesting also to see that the people who didn't have a really strong practice, sometimes even though they had more spare time and could check in with more teachings, there's some degeneration also. So this is where we see the value or the necessity of really establishing those disciplines. So it is good to rely on centers, to do in-person retreats, but it is also important that we establish the discipline and integrate it into our life. So I think overall the alcohol sales went up all around the world, and a lot more people watching Netflix and YouTube Premium, etc. But for those who, I know a lot of people in Malaysia who joined online teachings, online retreats, and I think during the peak of the lockdown for my own fortnightly live streams, about 220 people were joining, and probably 80% were Malaysian. So now I have this interesting experience where I see people's faces and I feel like I know them, but I can't remember meeting them. And I'm like, do I know you? And I say, I attend your online teaching, Ajahn. Oh, okay, I know you from this 1 inch by 1 inch picture. It's nice to meet people. And today is Mother's Day in Malaysia. I think it's also Mother's Day in Australia. My own mum, still alive. She's 83 now. My mum, she walks 8 kilometers once a day. She takes my sister's dog for a walk. And so it's very interesting to see the way I think exercise plays an important role in keeping people's minds healthy as well. My mum's memory is still good. She drives to the supermarket, cooks for herself, and she's very proud of her independence. She says, "I'm fiercely independent and I'm proud of that," she says. Good for you, Mum. Let us know if you need any help. Yeah. In Thailand, there's a phrase we actually call our teachers, Po Me Kuba Ajahn, our mother and father Dhamma teacher. And, our physical parents give us our body and feed us and take care of us when we're sick, make sure we go off to school, all of those things. Encourage us to live within the law of the country in most circumstances. And our Dhamma teachers, they nurture us in a different way, don't they? When they explain how we practice dana, sila and bhavana. So my main teacher in Thailand is Ajahn, but I studied earlier as a younger monk with Ajahn Jaya, Lumpur Pasano, Lumpur Sameto, and so I'm fortunate in that I have many parents in Dhamma. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness, is another of my Dhamma teachers. and reflecting at times on the different things that I learned from my teachers, and that made it possible for 26 years later to still be here as a monk, and hopefully have some understanding of the practice, and naturally feel a lot of gratitude to. When I was a teenager, I used to argue with my parents quite a bit, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life, and my mum wanted me to be a doctor, and my dad wanted me to be a lawyer, and my dad said, "You're very argumentative, you'd be a good lawyer." I was like, but I didn't follow their wishes, and they were frustrated. They would say, "What are you going to do with your life?" I would say, "I don't know." So, "What do you mean you don't know?" "I mean, I don't know." And I did get good enough grades to go to university, and I actually refused that opportunity, and because I had an intuition. I'd met many people who'd gone to university and who had graduated, and they didn't seem particularly happy to me. And so I guess there was something in my own experience from a young age, that there was some kind of awareness that there is something worth pursuing in this world, some kind of a path to peace and happiness. But there was also an intuition that I haven't met it yet. And there was a kind of a sense of I'm not going to commit to anything that might obstruct me from discovering that. I think this is the way wisdom parami from past lives might manifest. Is one of the ways it might manifest as a kind of a healthy dose of suspicion and determination to remain somewhat autonomous. So one of the interesting ways that it manifested is I just didn't learn to drive, which is somewhat strange for an Australian, where everybody learns to drive. But what happens is if you learn to drive is you often get a car, right? And then you have car payments, registration, insurance, and if you crash the car, all sorts of things come with that. So I didn't learn to drive, didn't get the car, and I was doing part-time jobs, wondering what I was going to do with my life. And that did make, when somebody suggested to me that I do a 10-day retreat, a Goenka, SN Goenka Vipassana retreat, when I was 21, I could make the time available and I could go and do that. So my karma this lifetime, I'd never attended Sunday school, I'd never studied Buddhism. I was just looking for ways to be truly happy, and somebody suggested that I do a 10-day retreat. I did that 10-day retreat, and it was extremely painful. Australians don't get much practice sitting on the floor like this. And I remember my knees were up at about this height at the time. It was 12 hours of sitting a day. And it was just like, back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain. And then Mr. Goenka, he was saying, start again, with this sweeping mindfulness practice from the tip of the head to the toes, and I wanted to run away because it was, but it was in the middle of mountains and it was the middle of winter. And my sister was coming to pick me up, and this was before mobile phones, so I couldn't make a call, come and get me. But I did start paying attention to his Dhamma talks in the evenings. It was by video in those days. And he started to explain the Four Noble Truths. And this was enormously helpful because, I'd been observing that this feeling I had, that I already had nice food, I already had certain sensual pleasures. I could go to the beach, I could go to the movies, I could explore sex. All of that was available to me as someone in my early 20s in Sydney. And there was this awareness that if I had more money, it might be a different beach, it might be a slightly more beautiful lover, it might be different clothes, but my clothes were already nice, my food was already nice, the beach was already nice, my lover was also nice. And I was very confused because I was miserable. And there was this sense of, well, if I get more money and I just have more of the same, I don't trust that this is going to make me happy. So I was worried about myself. And then one of the things that Goenka said was, unsatisfactoriness is the nature of conditioned reality. Sensual pleasures are fleeting. They don't give lasting satisfaction. And I was very relieved because I had the realization, I'm not crazy. I'm a Buddhist. This makes sense. And I remember being observing my teachers throughout high school, and there was just this sense of, my teachers would complain I was like an A- student. I think my grade point average was 88.5. And all of my report cards said the same thing. My name was Brett. Although Brett does well, he could do better. Brett is talkative and sometimes disruptive in class. And my father would get on my case about this every time my report card came home. Why don't you apply yourself more? Your teachers say you could do better. And I remember that there was something in me that just could not commit to it wholeheartedly because it didn't seem real enough or true enough or important enough. There was something in me that was holding myself back. I'm not committing to this. And my sister, who became a journalist, and journalists are renowned for being cynical, she said that I was the most irreverent person that she knew. I didn't respect anything. But this changed when I met the Buddhist teachings. Because here is, I was looking at this chubby Indian fellow talking about the unsatisfactoriness of everything. And he seemed like a genuinely happy person. Oh, that's interesting. And then on day 8, I had an experience where all of the pain evaporated from the mind, and there was a feeling of contentment, serenity, fullness, coolness, a very deep feeling of peace. Probably only lasted 10 seconds. After 8 days of pain, and then all the pain came back. But there was some kind of recognition. There was something in me that recognized, this is actually what I've been looking for. This is something I can commit to. This is something truly valuable. And so I'm very grateful that I signed up for that retreat, and I did that retreat. Very grateful that I didn't run away and made it to day 8. One of the things that Goenka said, Ajahn Goenka said, is that to get the results from meditation practice, we have to put forth the effort, just like athletes train and just like performers rehearse. If we want the results from meditation, he suggested an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening every day, which is a big commitment. But because I had glimpsed that deeper peace, I actually made that commitment, and I think I managed it for about 3 months. After 3 months, it became once a day. After about 6 months, it became 45 minutes. After a year, it was down to about 20 minutes. But I did meditate every day since doing that first retreat. And I have this experience in Thailand where I fairly consistently feel baffled when I meet these lovely Buddhists coming and paying respects, having a lot of faith, making great offerings, and I ask them, do you have a meditation practice? And they say, no. Because ever since I discovered the Buddhist practice tradition, I did have a meditation practice, I committed. And so I guess it's, one monk was trying to explain it to me when I was complaining about some Thai lay people. They said, well, some people have a lot of dana barami, they're working on their dana and their faith. They just don't yet have the kind of wisdom and the discipline to commit to the bhavana. They're laying the foundation. But after about 2 years, I did decide to explore my interest in Buddhist practice further, and I decided to travel to Thailand. And In those days we didn't have Google. I couldn't do a Google search. And I actually made a aspirational prayer. I was working in the vegan cafe, and I had to close up shop. And I closed up shop and I looked to the sky and I said, I admit it, I don't know what to do with my life. Going to the beach, going to movies, having sex isn't working. But then I made a vow. I said, if you give me a sign. Now, I didn't believe in a creator God. In those days I didn't believe in hell. But I did believe in devas, for whatever reason. And I did believe in karma and rebirth. So I said, okay, forces of goodness in the universe, if you give me a sign, I promise to follow. I promise I'll follow it. And what's interesting is I started to get some interesting signs after this. And there's several things I think are a factor. One was the sincerity of the prayer. I really meant it. Like to the very core of my being, I meant it. And I think also there must have been some merit from past lives. A few days later, somebody forgot the Lonely Planet guide to Thailand at the restaurant where I worked. And I picked it up and I was reading the introduction and saying, oh, 95% of Thailand is Buddhist. And then that's interesting. 2 days later, the owner of the book came back, I want my book back. So, okay, I gave it back. But the seed had gone in my mind. And then it was payday, a week or so later. In those days, we got paid in cash from an envelope, took out my wallet, was putting my pay in. I noticed this strange coin. And I asked my friend, what's this? She said, oh, that's 5 baht, that's Thai money. One side had a picture of a Thai chetty, the other had a picture of the Rama IX, the king, previous king. And when that happened, the hairs on my arms went up. So, ooh. And I noticed, book, Thailand, Thai money. Then another thing happened which kind of sealed the deal. I used to clean the fryer. The fryer was a German Dorf fryer. The food was vegan and Japanese. There's this galvanized iron part that I used to have to put on the pipe when I had to change and filter the oil. I'd never noticed it. I worked in this place for a year. So it's late at night, kind of blurry, putting on this pipe. And then I noticed this pipe had one word, Thailand. In English. It's pretty weird, isn't it? And I stood up and I said, that's it. In 10 weeks' time, I'm going to Thailand. I made that resolution. It's kind of like a satcha adhitan, and which is not a common habit for Australians. But I don't know where it came from, but I'm glad I had that tendency. So I saved up enough. It's not easy to save money in a place like Sydney, so especially on a waiter's wage. But I managed to get my plane ticket and my passport, and I had no savings, but I'd made my vow. So I had to sell my bed, my carpet, my computer, my mountain bike. I sold everything I could. I got $1,000, which, 30 years ago was enough to go backpacking. 4 days before I left the restaurant, a Canadian backpacker came in and she asked, is there a job? And I said, there may be, because I'm leaving. And she said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Thailand. She said, I just came from Thailand yesterday. And she said, why are you going to Thailand? I said, well, I want to go to the beach, and I'm interested in Buddhism. She said, I know where there's a meditation center on a tropical island with a view of the beach, where the teachers teach in English. And I said, could you please give me that address? What are the chances? In those days, there wasn't a Google search, English-speaking retreats in Thailand. But I think the power of prayer and the power of past merits, I ended up spending 5 out of 9 months at that meditation center. And the teachers, an American man and an Australian woman, were teaching reflective meditations as well as breath meditation and vipassana methods. One of the things they talked about is yoniso manasikara, and one of the wise reflection. And today's Mother's Day, Lord Buddha says that wise reflection is the mother of wisdom, gives birth to wisdom, thinking wisely. And so one of the things they taught, one of the reflective methods that they taught, was to contemplate karma, the law of karma, and to recognize good fortune. And this was enormously helpful to me because I think we all have a gift of feeling sorry for ourselves and focusing on the negative. And what they were teaching was to focus on the good things. And I think in Western culture in particular, when people grow up and they might have some idiosyncrasies or some challenges, it's like a kind of somewhat popular to blame one's parents for one's suffering and go and get therapy and talk about how terrible your parents were. And then this is not a very Buddhist idea. And I recently met a very wonderful practitioner in Thailand. He's not a bhikkhu. He's what they call a rishi, but he does have extraordinary samadhi. And some of my own bhikkhu teachers respect this yogi quite deeply. And he was talking about the power of respect for parents and gratitude to parents. And now I was once in Ladakh, taking a little tangent. I was in Ladakh about 14 years ago. That's in the Himalayan region of India. I was with a French friend, and we were in a remote area next to a lake, and we'd planned to stay 5 days. He'd already hired the van. I wanted to meditate next to a Himalayan lake, see what that was like, contemplate the big sky, emptiness. So we were all set to have a nice time, but I started to have this irritating feeling like, I want to go, I want to leave. Something's not right. But I felt awkward because my friend had prepaid car rental, paid for accommodation. We'd gone all this way. It's like 5,000 meters elevation. We'd already got over our altitude sickness. We'd made all this effort to be there. And I said, no, but I have to say something. I said to him, his name's Francois. I said, Francois, I have an uncomfortable feeling. I just feel like I want to leave. I don't know why. And he said, I have the same feeling. I'm so glad you told me. And we left the next day. 2 hours after we left, a mudslide closed the road. And see, it had rained the night before, and we hadn't thought anything of it, because coming from Thailand, similar to Malaysia, there was a lot of rain. But normally it doesn't rain in Ladakh. It snows at night time on the mountain peaks, and the water comes down as snow melt in little streams. Basically there's no trees, so you have dust and dirt and stones piled very, very, very high. And if it does rain, you get mudslides. So we went back to a homestay that we'd been staying with a lovely Buddhist family, and I think it was about 10 kilometers away, 200 people died in another mudslide. And the reason I bring this up is that one of the things that this Rishi, this gifted practitioner, said was that there's certain types of merit that he said will literally protect you from disaster. And I was interested in that. And I said, what are those types of merit? And he said, one of them is gratitude to parents. He said, this is karmically so potent. And he also said there's something that he's noticed, that the people who get cancer, he noticed that the ones that recover are the ones that really love and feel grateful to their parents. That's just an observation that he had. And then he said something. He said, if people think, you know, in Thailand you have this situation that young people have a baby, perhaps that wasn't so well planned. they give the baby to their own parents, so the child grows up with the grandparents while the parents work in Bangkok. And some of those children can grow up feeling like, my parents abandoned me, or they didn't really love me. And he was saying, you know, people who think like this, it's not correct. He said, the correct way to think about parents is, with regards to your body, my heart. My father gave me my heart. It's exactly the same size as his. My mother gave me my liver, my eyes, my ears. Whatever they had, they gave me equal to them. He said, this is the correct way to think about parents. All sorts of psychological challenges aside, he says, whatever painful dynamics or phenomenon manifested through your relationship with your parents, he says, that's your karma. And we should see that as our opportunity to lighten and purify our karma. But the relationship we should have with our parents is gratitude for the body, the human birth, and the opportunity that we have to then practice Dhamma. So this was interesting. And so merit is real. Merit evidently has a powerful protective quality. And another thing that he mentioned, I think he said there were 5 qualities that lead to having a very powerful, potent protection. Another of those qualities was paying respect to that which should be respected. And another was truthfulness. Another was sincerity, doing things sincerely, like if you decide to do something, really doing it. And I didn't record the conversation. I know there was 5. I can only remember 4. Forgive me. So gratitude to parents, doing things sincerely. If you decide to do it sincerely. And then truthfulness, paying respect to that which one should pay respect to. What's interesting about that time in Ladakh was that I was, I think, 12 panthas. I've been a bhikkhu for 12 years. After my 10th pansa, I'd gone to Bodh Gaya and I had decided to do 10,000 full-length Tibetan-style prostrations to the Bodhi tree. And I had done that. So if we're looking at like karmic causes, paying respects to that which one should offer respects to, it's I had done that. I'm very grateful that I pay respects to the Bodhi tree 10,000 times. And my relationship to commitment as a bhikkhu, having come from Australia, I want to encourage you to commit to your daily practice and increase your practices. I'll give the example of my own life. Sometimes people look at monks, and especially senior monks, and they see kind of a solid senior monk who has faith, and they don't see the causal process sometimes. When I was a novice at Wat Nanachat, I wanted to disrobe 6 out of 7 days. And the reason I didn't was because on average 1 day a week I felt happier than I did before. So I'd started, because of keeping the precepts, I'd started to feel what they call freedom of remorse. When you just don't do anything wrong, there's a lovely feeling of, well, at least I'm a good person, I'm not harming anybody. And certain lightness of body, lightness of mind, easy joy. But there were other days when it's like 3 in the morning, you have to get up again. The mattress is a straw mat, there isn't even a mattress. Walking 5 kilometers with bare feet on an empty stomach, it's like, oh God, do I really have to do this again? And so I couldn't, the policy in those days was that if you were to become a bhikkhu, there was this, you would try out being a novice, but if you were to become a bhikkhu, they preferred people to make a 5-year commitment. I was lucky nobody asked me, Samanera Achalo, are you committed to 5 years? Because I could not have answered yes. But they didn't ask me. I snuck through. And what I could do was commit to 1 year first. And I remember during the Pansa, during the rainy season retreat, the way I got through it was promising myself I could disrobe when it ended. You can disrobe afterwards, just get through this one pantha. You'll feel pleased to have done this for the rest of your life. And of course I got through the rainy season retreat and there was a sense of, yeah, I could probably do one more year. Committed to one more year. So after 2 years, I committed to 3 more years. By that stage, I probably wanted to disrobe 2 or 3 days a week. But I was noticing, the longer I keep these precepts, the more I do this meditation, there are more days where the mind experiences well-being, and contentment, lightness. And due to the power of karma, of course, painful mind states do still manifest. But there's more ability to be mindful of them, reflect around them, consider benefits and drawbacks. So when I got to 5 years as a bhikkhu, I determined another 5 years. And one of the reasons I went to Bodh Gaya at the 10-year period was I wanted to make a significant gesture of committing for another 10 years. I wanted to make it a powerful, almost like going forth again, expressing my gratitude as well. But there's something else I noticed. In my 10th rainy season retreat, I was with Ajahn and Nana at the time. I had made my vow at the end of the 5 rains retreats to do 5 more. And in this 10th one, I noticed there just wasn't much energy for practice. It seems like things were kind of petering out. I was in a good place, a good teacher, good opportunity, and there just wasn't much energy for it. Wasn't much rapture, wasn't much joy. And so the last day of the rainy season retreat came, and then this voice kind of came up in my mind, so are you disrobing or what? And then I realized, oh yeah, I'd only made a commitment to this point. So it's like that lack of energy, that lack of enthusiasm was because my commitment had an expiry date. And then I realized, I was like, of course I'm going to continue practicing. And when I set that resolution, like energy came back straight away. I really noticed that, and I wanted to mention it today, because I think having a clear intention to practice affects our mind. Making some kind of a commitment and meaning it is a factor in what brings forth energy. So when we're looking at the 5 spiritual powers, faith is the first, energy is the second. We need energy to apply to being mindful. That's the third of the 5 spiritual powers. We need energy to invest into maintaining our mindfulness, doing our practice, so that the samadhi and the wisdom develop. So things like commitment, and I think another thing I'd like to talk about is consistency, because the greater well-being, contentment and joy that I felt was related to the fact that the practice was consistent throughout. And it's like when you're a monk in our tradition, you don't really have much choice. It's the morning chanting, the evening chanting, the chores time, the alms round. It's quite a bit of time to practice, and you get constant reminders. So I can see that commitment and effort lays the conditions to be able to make more effort and be more consistent. And I think that tendency that we all have to feel like, oh, I'm tired today, I need a rest, I need a holiday, I'll do more next week. But this actually doesn't work. And one of my teachers, Lumpur Biek, says, it's actually better to sit at the end of the day slumped over dribbling than it is to not sit, because at least you're putting forth the effort. It's better to sit in the morning, obviously, after having had some rest, but if you can increase to twice a day, you also go through the motions of doing it a second time. There will be days when there isn't tiredness, there will be days when the mind becomes bright. And just from making that effort, we're sending the message to the mind that we have a commitment, we're really trying. And some people have written my book, 3,000 Hours of Meditation at the Bodhi tree. And again, I'd just like to mention, to kind of emphasize that point, it was not possible for me to, so there's been many times where I've gone to Bodh Gaya and sat for 2.5 hours in 4 sessions, 10 hours a day for more than a month. I've done it many times. So I actually recently passed 4,000 hours of formal meditation at the Bodhi tree, and I'm considering making a vow to do 5,000. So and under consideration. But it didn't start like that. It started with trying to do 6 hours a day and feeling very frustrated because of the noise and the impingement and all these things. But then, as I was approaching, I lead pilgrimages. I sometimes would lead pilgrimages with my own students to the 4 holy sites, and then I would spend a period of time in Bodh Gaya for private practice afterwards. And I was working out one day how many hours I'd been accumulating, and I'd realized that if I did 140 hours more, I would make it to 1,000 hours after years of going there. And I thought, okay, that would be good for my confidence, dignity, something good to have accomplished. And when I got to the 1,000 hours, there was this feeling of wholesome pride, joy, rapture, and the thought arose, I'm going to do 2,000 more, 1,000 for the Buddha, 1,000 for the Dhamma, 1,000 for the Sangha. Because Lord Buddha talks about the Patipati Puja, when he talks about offerings which are most suitable to offer to the Buddha, he says the offering of practice is the best offering. So okay, I've offered 1,000 hours of practice to the Buddha, I'm going to offer another 2,000 hours. And I remember when I got to the 2,000 hour point, there was a real feeling of, oh God, I wish I just vowed to do 2,000 because I'm getting older and this is really hard. And a friend of mine was passing through Bodh Gaya, Ajahn Achalo, Abbot of Anandagiri, and I asked him, do you mind being my friend while the next few times I come to Bodh Gaya and do the last 1,000 hours with me? I need a friend, I need a buddy. And he did agree to do that, and that was very helpful. So this was like, when we're coming to centres like this, practicing together, it's very helpful, because sometimes I was a bit tired. Sometimes there's these loud Indian weddings and you don't get enough sleep, very loud, and like 10 meters from the guest house. And I'd be kind of like, oh. But he'd be inspired, and other times he'd be kind of, and I'd be inspired, and we kind of support one another in that way. And but basically I worked up a capacity through the effort. One of the ways I can get through 10 hours a day, now I like it. Now the thought of going and meditating for 10 hours at the Bodhi tree is like literally something I want to do every day, because I learned how to do it. And what I had to learn to do is how to use the 4 Brahma Viharas, the metta practice, the mudita practice. When you're sitting there and annoying phenomenon come, you have to train the mind to rejoice in the good intentions of the people, and then, or recollect the example of the Buddha. He practiced through much more hardship than this, feeling mudita for his practice, gratitude for his practice, like skillful ways of reflecting that brighten the mind and make the mind in a balanced state to just help you get through a difficult. And then also when you sit for longer periods, you can observe those mind states all change, of course. So when you're sitting for a 2.5 hour period, normally whatever mind state you started with, you will see it arise and cease, and you'll have different ones. So you learn more about not grasping at them, understanding that they will pass, and with wise reflection also kind of brightening, elevating the mind. And so, and also with the pain, you learn how to, we don't realize this at first, but it's actually sitting with a bit more pain, sitting with a bit more hunger, sitting with a bit more heat, sitting with a bit more cold, is actually what makes our mindfulness sharper and stronger. And it's one of those things we don't know unless we do it. And so that part of the mind that says, no, I'm too tired, no, it's too hot, no, it's too cold, no, I'm hungry, no, I really do need sleep. We need to develop a healthy suspicion of that. And we need to learn to be a little more patient, a little more determined. And so if people aren't yet doing a once-a-day session, I would encourage you to. And as today is Mother's Day, we want to give some thought to what gives birth to your future enlightenment, what ends birth, in a way, what will end rebirth, and what will give birth to realization of liberating Dhamma. It's a sincere and diligent, consistent practice. So if you are not doing your once-a-day practice, you have never-ending births waiting for you, and never-ending deaths. If you are doing your daily practice, number of births is limited. It's a limited edition. If you want to decrease your number of births, Ajahn says this, some people feel like they don't practice because they don't feel that they can attain stream entry this lifetime. Even if they practice hard, they don't feel they have the requisite virtue or samadhi. But Ajahn says that the degree to which we do practice this lifetime is reducing the number of rebirths. Very, very tangibly, very, very definitely. Nibbana is coming closer. So it's an important thing to understand. For those of you who are meditating once a day, only once a day, I'd like you to encourage you to do twice a day, please. And this is coming from people who do it, who practice what we preach. I meditate before my arms round, after my arms round. Probably average 5 sessions a day, plus 2 periods of retreat. And obviously we're supported to do that. But we do also have abbots and monks in Thailand have all sorts of duties. I could make all sorts of excuses not to practice if I wanted to. And I try to see that for what it is, an excuse not to practice. And I consider the reason to practice. It's like, this is an excuse not to practice, but the reason to practice is superior. So we have to remind ourselves, just do it. And so I know people who live in hot countries tend to sleep quite late because the weather's nice and cool at night. But I'd like to encourage you to go to bed a bit earlier. And there's a few things I want to give you in terms of practical advice for those of you who are interested in increasing your meditation skills, increasing the quality of your meditation. I'd like to encourage you to not look at your portable devices past 8 p.m. because the blue light from these devices tells your brain that it's daytime. So it affects your natural feeling of feeling tired. You won't feel tired and you might play with it and look at all sorts of things and realize, oh my God, it's 1 a.m, fall asleep. So, but if you turn it off at 8, you'll naturally start to feel tired at 9 or 10. And if you can meditate before you sleep, it's better. And if you don't send your mind out every time you answer someone else's message, every time you comment on social media, you're sending your mind out. Other places, other people. So if you turn it off, you keep a bit more energy for the present moment, body and mind. Get to bed earlier and set the intention to get up and meditate. Don't look at your phone. I recommend putting it on flight mode. You're going on a journey inward. Laying the causes to go to heaven and beyond, not sending your mind out into this world. So just put it on flight mode, give yourself an hour, an hour and a half, do some chanting, do some meditation, wake up, wash your face, brush your teeth, bow to your shrine, do your chanting, do your meditation, because if you do it in the morning, we all want to be mindful in all postures, but we need to establish a good quality of mindfulness first. And then we set the intention. Throughout the day today, I will make an effort to be mindful of my thoughts, my speech, my actions. And this setting the intention and having this consistency of practice, you will notice that you develop more clarity. And the function of mindfulness is to recognize things truthfully according to their true nature. So what happens is you become more mindful of the way unwholesome things affect your mind, and you become more truthful about it. Because actually it's not so skillful to say these things, it's not so skillful to gossip this much, or talk behind this person's back this much, or it's not so skillful to get into these arguments. It's not so skillful to keep eating even though I feel full, etc. You get more presence of mind that just notices what's skillful and what isn't skillful. And you begin to be able to train yourself in setting healthy boundaries and cultivating the wholesome, abandoning the unwholesome. And then try to sit again at the end of the evening. And this is important because there's an important function of reviewing that happens then. You set your day with the intention of practicing. At the end of the day, you sit again and say, how did it go? There's a natural kind of a reviewing, okay, I wish I hadn't done that, I wish I'd done more of this, I wish I'd done less of that. Not getting into fault finding, but just kind of having an honest look. How did it go? And reviewing it truthfully, making efforts to keep cultivating and training ourselves. And then what normally happens is if people can do this for a period of months, is they really see the benefit. And then in the beginning we have to force ourselves. And there is unpleasantness that we have to work with, the resistance. But once we see what it's like to have more clarity, more coolness, and the choices that gives us in our lives, like when there's a good presence of mind, your reaction might be coming up, your thoughts might be coming up, and you begin to have choices. Should I say something? Shouldn't I say something? Is now the right time to say it, or is now not the right time to say it? If I do say it, what time would be the best time? Whereas before it might just be blind reaction, unskillfulness, and then regretting afterwards. If we cultivate more clarity, it gives us a lot more choice in our lives, and then we make a lot more good karma and make a lot less bad karma. And when we see that, we see the more presence of mind, more clarity, more skillfulness in our choices, less remorse, then we tend to want to do more and more practice. We're beginning to see that there's less suffering in this life, in this moment, in this day, and that learning how to recognize wholesome and unwholesome, learning how to abandon and contain the unwholesome, learning how to increase the wholesome. So, I do hope that something that I've said may be helpful to you, and I hope that you maintain and increase your good efforts. So, I offer this for your reflection.